this whole being president thing is like, what do I do? Like, am I supposed to talk to folks or I don't know. I don't know how this works.
Some of us can tell you.
I know. How many former presidents do we have in the room? At least two.
I hope you get a bump in pay.
Right. Carl, we got my agent contact again. So, okay, guests. We have at least one guest in this room. Do we have any on Zoom?
No.
Okay. With Daniel, who I met at the Mike's Camera Photo Expo, is here. And Daniel, will you tell us how you found out about us? I know how you found out about us, but tell everybody how you found out about us.
Well,
And what kind of
I
photography
thought
you do.
I went to the expo over at Denver University. And it's good to see what other people are doing who are these guys are extreme, and so are the women in their photographic exploits. And then just talking to all the reps, I got to talk to a rep for my camera, so that was nice to, get some background or, check some things out. So it was an educational thing, and just to be around other photographers, just to immerse yourself in it. My background, gosh, I've been taking photographs for years. I had some very good teachers when black and white and film development was, you all remember that. I had lots of dark room work, and just slowly watched the evolution of the digital and Kodak slowly slipping into the background. It did not diminish my eye for photography and how I saw things. So after losing a couple of cameras and going dark for a while, just okay, let's get back into it from a digital standpoint and see what that has. So I've been shooting mostly black and white for the digital. So I was telling Tom here since I did black and white so much, I was familiar with the grayscale, and it just would make it made my color photography that much better. So I was seeing how colors were reflecting the transitions and the tonal gradations so much better in the black and white, and then kind of shifting back and forth, in the same shoot from color to black and white. That's kind of neat to them. Other than taking the film out of the camera, sliding it back in and going again. And that's kind of a nice transition to be. So this camera, I've got a Fujifilm. My brother-in-law gave it to me about 3 or 4 months ago. So it's amazing, doing something, how everything starts to show up. And I had already purchased a Leica. So I'm kind of getting used to the digital with the Fuji. It's like my workhorse. And because the Leica is like a small computer with a scope on it. And so it's just looking at the manual, that scared me. So I'm just doing it a little bit at a time, just taking one definition and then learning all about that and how that applies within the camera itself.
So yeah, the other cool thing about Daniel being here for tonight's competition is that he's also an architect, so that's a good timing. Anyway, welcome, Daniel.
You're welcome. Thank you. You can cut me off right there. I was trying to fill in your space there.
It's all good. Oz, do you have a guest today too, or?
Yeah, my wife.
I know. Is she a guest or is she just
I'm a hanger on.
you're a hanger on her? Okay.
Yeah, we had an appointment somewhere and I come directly here.
I'm glad you're here to join us. Okay, well then I guess that does it for guests. If you don't have any on Zoom, Carl.
Actually, we do now.
Oh, great.
Charles Hutchinson just logged in a little bit ago. So, Charles, if you would unmute and just tell us a little bit about yourself, type of stuff that you shoot, how you found our club, and those kind of things.
This is actually my second meeting I've come to. I was
Mhm.
at the last the general meeting. I figured I'd come see what the competition stuff was about.
Sure.
But been I was into photography during my school years, way back when. Also, and spent a fair amount of time in a dark room doing black and white film. Picked up a Canon 30D to try to get back into photography quite a while ago, and was never super thrilled with the quality of the images I was getting out of that camera, so I kind of dropped it again. But recently decided I wanted to try again to get back into it, and picked up a little Sony camera, and that's where I'm at now.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us again. And I hope you enjoyed this evening. We've got 65 images to go through, so you'll see some shining examples of architectural photography.
That's a lot. All right, one quick announcement over here on my end, and that is just a quick talk about the board positions that we have open, that we're going to have open for 2026. We need some volunteers. We need treasurer, we need a secretary, and we need I'm just going from memory, we need a membership chair.
Yes.
And maybe competitions. You'd have to talk to Carl about that, but did I miss one, Carl?
Nope, that's it.
No, we have vice president. Yeah. So it would be great to get anyone new or veteran to step up into one of those positions. There's nothing to be scared of. If, say, for example, somebody wanted to step into the treasurer position, Cecilia is going to give you a lot of great information, and she has it on plug and play mode right now, for example. So don't be shy, and love to see some people get involved. Last thing I'll say is that November 8th, mark your calendar for 4:30 in the Low-High neighborhood. Jim Shadler, a member, and I are going to do a photo walk up there on Saturday, November 8th, starting at Avanti, which is a restaurant at 32nd and Pecos. But that's a good setup for nighttime competition in November. We good? Can I have Bob share a screen and we'll get going?
Almost. One thing next week.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Next week is our tech talk and swap meet. And the other day I put out an email to everybody to, go to the website, gave you a link for a form to fill out. Unfortunately, I've only gotten one entry on that form, and it happened less than 5 minutes ago from Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. So I would encourage you, and I will send out a reminder email on Friday because we're cutting off the questions on Monday. Feed us some questions, and basically this is an AMA. It's a ask me anything kind of situation. Except the people giving you answers will be not only Andrew, our presenter, but also other club members, other people who use the same camera system that you do. I'm expecting to have the Nikon folks in one corner and the Canon folks in another corner and the Sony folks in another corner and the Fuji and Olympus people and whatever else that we've got out there. But this is a great opportunity to, collectively get information from a bunch of different people about questions you have on your camera system. And then the last half hour, we're going to have a little swap meet and have, clean out your photo closet and give away or donate some gear to other people, things like that. It'll be a great meeting.
All right, so are we ready to start that slideshow?
Yeah, let me just say that tonight's going to be on architecture, urban or rural. So we're going to see a lot of buildings and structures, some farm stuff, some stuff out in the field, a lot of downtown kind of stuff, some very interesting images. Our judge this evening is Paul Weinrauch. He is a passionate commercial photographer who just this afternoon was doing his commercial photography thing. He hails from Colorado, and in 1999, Paul sold everything he owned to hit the road, capturing his epic journey through a lens which ignited his passion for photography. While his photography skills let him express his creativity, Paul's true calling is to be of service to others. When he's not buzzing around with a cup of coffee, being the Department Chair of the Visual, Audio, and Media Arts Department at Red Rocks Community College. Paul can be found capturing imagery for his commercial and advertising clients. Occasionally, he does need to unwind, and on his time off, he goes for long runs, cooks up a storm in the kitchen, and spends quality time with his family and friends. During the summer or winter, you may find him scaling 14ers and taking in the stunning Colorado scenery. Thank you, Paul, for joining us this evening. We appreciate having you here again.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add to what I said, or perhaps talk a little bit about your judging style?
Sure. The only other thing I would add is I've been up until this year, I owned the largest nonprofit for adjudicated art shows in Colorado, and also the longest running. And I just walked away from that as the director. And so I think one of my favorite things to do is to be able to look at hundreds and hundreds of pieces of artwork. So I'm really excited to be here. And I come from a very technical background, as I started out my career in architecture, so I'm really excited to see all this stuff tonight.
Awesome. Very good. Well, yeah, if I remember right from last time that you judged for us, you had just gotten done looking at 6,000 images or something like that for the group
Yeah,
that you're talking about there. So
quite a
we
few
have,
thousand.
yeah, we only have 1% of that tonight. So
Okay, good.
so real quick, obviously this is our calibration image. So, Zoom does warp our images just a little bit. They may look a little undersaturated, etc. Paul, you got the originals that I sent you for review. So if you need to, you can pop back and forth, look at those as you're judging. But for those in the room or on Zoom, if this image looks a little flat, a little undersaturated, a little low contrast, a little whatever, just know that all the images that you're looking at this evening will also look that way. So Bob's going to show the images. As they come up, I will read the title. Then I'll go to you, Paul, for your critique and scoring. And every once in a while, when we've got a group of 9s and 10s, we'll pause, talk to the image makers, get their commentary on it, and that's how our evening will go. Our first image here is Haunted Mental Institution.
I'm a huge fan of kind of this desaturated look. Overall, I really appreciate the image. Great title, by the way, because I didn't know the title. And kind of like the desaturated, a little bit of noise. I think it was well edited. I really like the overall aesthetic. I like the impact that it's having, the storytelling that's occurring. So I think even without the title, I'm certainly getting an idea of what would expect from the title. So, seeing the broken window, the leading lines into the shot, I think that the trees frame it really well. I think even having the tree coming out from the background, I think is interesting to kind of bring everything to the center of the image. And for me, I do appreciate having nice straight lines, the vertical lines on the outside, to be able to shoot it. I think there's enough foreground, but not too much. I like having some of the dark corners in the top left of the image, to always keep pulling me back into the image of the house. So for this image, I gave this an 8.
This is Renaissance Taihan Tower.
So I really like the viewpoint. I like seeing being up so high. It gives you a different perspective, almost like a bird's eye view. And I also appreciate not having the converging lines, just having those nice straight lines. And for the most part, for the truth, and as a true architectural photographer doing corporate commercial architecture, I'm always dealing with straight lines. So you don't always need them. I think there's ways to do it without it. And I think it's always important to consider whether or not you need those vertical lines. And I think it really kind of shows the stature of the building. I think for me, I think I start to lose some of the overall. And again, this is my own personal aesthetic, so don't take it personal. It feels like too HDR for me. I feel like you're trying to stretch the dynamic range a little bit too much. I think that having a little bit more deeper shadows, maybe the green's not so green, maybe adding a little bit more yellow into that green so it doesn't feel so vibrant. But I do like the juxtaposition between kind of the reds of the top rooftop as well as with the blue of the background. And I think having a little bit more of the floor, a little bit more of the ground to be able to kind of, really kind of plant it on where it's at, I think it would have been felt a little bit nicer. For me, I would be thinking, is there a way that we could use a tilt shift lens and just shift it down by just a couple degrees? Would have been nice. But I really do appreciate the image. This image, I gave a 7.
Arcadian Passage.
So really fun image. It's always interesting when you start taking architecture and adding in people to it to really kind of bring life to this image. I think it kind of draws my eye. I like seeing the leading lines to the people. I think it's interesting to see what the people are doing. I think maybe part of the biggest critique I have is that I wish that the people stood out just a little bit more, not too much more, because I don't want to take away from the architecture the really strong structure of the columns on both the left and right side. I do appreciate having some symmetry here, but I really like the ability to be able to take the image and still have it somewhat asymmetrical by having some light on the right side, having the stronger columns on the left side. So I think it does a good job of creating a dynamic image. Oftentimes I find that images that are symmetrical sometimes become too static. And I think this is doing a really good job of keeping the image from becoming static by having some off balances, by using elements within the image to be able to make it a little bit more dynamic, which I find super interesting. I think just having a little of the people a little bit more in the shot would have brought the image up just a little bit more for me. And I gave this one 8.
Lines of Sight.
It was fun. I actually did take a look at these images, and I did when I downloaded them today quickly, and as I was going through them, I kept coming back to this image. I really like the vertical lines in the image. I like the really hard contrast. But what's nice is I think it did a really good job of maintaining detail. And a lot of times when I work in black and white, as I'm sure many of you do, and I do this in color as well, but thinking about the zone system, and I think you did a really good job of really kind of keeping between like 2 and 9 in the zone system, which I think is really nice. And still kind of pushing the edges in several of the areas. So I think the dynamic range here is really fun. I think the other thing that I found really interesting about this image is because you have the rest of the city here, even though there's depth there and you can see the haze and the mountain in the background, because of the way it was shot vertically with the building in the foreground, it made it very 2D. And I think sometimes images don't need to feel 3D. I think sometimes taking an image that has 3D elements, because we live in a 3D space, and kind of pushing everything together, potentially using a longer lens to kind of really bring the background into the foreground. So for me, this was a really interesting image to be able to take and look at the building in the foreground with a really strong vertical lines, but then looking over to the right to see kind of that juxtaposition between there's depth there, but it's flat, and you're bringing it together closer to the front of the building. So for me, I gave this one a 9.
Monumental Architecture by Robert Mills.
What a fun juxtaposition between the tallness and the shortness of each of those buildings. I think that's what really stands out to me. And I think it's super interesting to be able to see that the colors between kind of having that warm versus the cool. So you're already using kind of that ability to be able to go foreground to background with the warm versus the cool. Even having a little bit of the reflection in the bottom is really nice to kind of build stature. It kind of gives it a grounding for you to be able to look at. And I think it tells a lot about what we're looking at. I think it was shot well at a good time of day. I think we are getting just a little bit of the sky in the background, so I can kind of see the skyline of the trees or the mountains that are back there, but not so much that it takes away from it. I find that in my opinion, I find this image can be hard to photograph because oftentimes I find that people make the background, not the subject, too black, or they raise the shadows too much. And I think it was really done well that I got enough of the background to know where it is, but not so much that it made the image feel flat and lose all of its contrast. I would have been interesting to see what would have happened if we would have cropped it a little bit more to really kind of push how tall that building is by kind of cropping in on both sides to see if it was really necessary to have that or if it would have taken away. And I'm not sure, but it was something that went through my head when I was looking at the image, is if we change the ratio a little bit more to make it more of a vertical image, a little bit more, I don't know what that would look like, but it would have been interesting. So I gave this one a 9.
A perfect compliment.
Fun. I think the interesting that stood out to me, and it was very subtle when I first look at this, is you have in the building in the very back that red. And so there's almost a balance that makes you pull your eye to the background and then take it to the foreground. And of course, you're thinking about the size of the image, the car to the buildings behind it. So I think the perspective that was there from the location where you shot it really kind of shows kind of the difference between the size of the car, the buildings behind it. I again, for me, I think this image for me, looking on a small screen, I would have liked to seen a a different crop ratio. I think it's getting a little too tight on the sides as far as breathing. And that's partially because we're on a monitor that's horizontal. But what I think I often try to think about when I'm looking at images or critiquing artwork is that always thinking about where it's being presented. So for me, being presented on the screen, I'd like to see a little bit more breathing room on the left and the right side of the image. But if I was to have this in person, I think this is a great composition. I would love to see this printed from the, pretty tall, like walking onto a door and seeing an entire door of it. I think having this printed would be huge and look really spectacular, as well as if I turned my monitor and made my monitor vertical, I think would also help this image significantly. And I gave this one an 8.
Next image, and this is Gaudi's kaleidoscope.
Cool image. What a fun image to look at. I think it's always interesting shooting architecture, because one of the things that I think as I go through looking at people's images as architecture is because architecture in itself is art. We're coming in as photographers and photographing spaces that are creations from other people. And the ability to be able to come into a space as a photographer and be able to put your own artistic viewpoint can somewhat be of a challenge. And I really appreciate it in this image that I feel like the photographer came in and really thought about how to be able to not only display the architect's work, but also the photographer coming in to be able to present almost their own vision, their own ideas about the subject matter, and be able to create its own narrative from a very different viewpoint. I really appreciate this one. I think that what was fun about this, and again, Kaleidoscope is a great title for this. And when I'm looking over to the right, that's what I see. I think I see a kaleidoscope. I think I see things moving around. But what I really liked is looking over to the left where you see the wall of those windows, that it still built some foundation and gave it some concreteness, which I really appreciated. And I think there's a good balance between left and right. I think the overall weight of the image is nice. I think having kind of it's almost in some ways black and white with these speckles of colors from the windows and a few other things, which I think is interesting, and the overall beige of the image. I think the image color rendition was beautifully done. Whether it was done in camera through Kelvin temperature or your editing, I think was nicely done. So for this image, I gave this one a 9.
Equestrian staircase.
Love the lines, just the circular lines and the motion that it creates. There's enough of the brick on the floor that I think you can almost see the motion of cars going around the circular image throughout it. I think it was an interesting use of a wide angle lens. We can see the bricks in the foreground getting wider. As it goes farther in, you can see you start to lose a little bit of detail. It gets a little bit smaller. I think what would have been interesting to see, and I don't know if it would have been better, something that I would have tried as photographer is I would have seen, just out of curiosity, what would happen if we made these lines vertical to see if it changed the story. And again, I'm not there. I wasn't the one editing, but I think it would have been interesting to see what those vertical lines would have looked like, and if it would have driven the circular story a little bit more instead of having these converging lines going down. But again, I think it's an interesting image. The light for me is a little too hard. I think people tend to look at bright areas of an image, and I think the most important part of the image is the bricks and the motion that it's creating from the left going around into a circular motion. And my eye does get drawn back to that very bright spot, especially since it's such a different tone than the ceiling of the image. But for certain, finding these images in this space, super interesting. I gave this one an 8.
The Avengers' new headquarters.
This is an image when I was talking about earlier, where sometimes you want to straighten an architectural image, have lines that aren't converging. And in this case, you want to have it. I really appreciate being able to see those converging lines. I think it adds an element of interest. I think it creates an element of vertical lines and kind of everything kind of converging together at the top, even all the way to the top where you see this triangle kind of in the center. And then having that symmetry, I think, is really interesting. There's lots of visual elements going on here, from the color of the warm versus the cool, and then having the sky back there, not too much. I think having just enough that it forces you back to the building. And again, having some of the lines that kind of go in a diagonal line kind of really kind of shows motion. The same thing holds true, that instead of having vertical lines that really show stature, having lines that converge or having lines that are diagonal or zigzag create a sense of motion, and give something. It kind of creates some excitement of an image. So I really appreciated that one for this one. And I gave this one an 8.
Pointing to heaven.
I can't think of the term off the top of my head, but some of my students always give me a hard time for kind of shooting that sideways look. I absolutely love how um, how diagonal this is. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, do you need less blue sky? How important is it? Do you get rid of some of this? But when I take a look, and if I was to crop that out, I think it actually loses how diagonal it is and it becomes more abstract. I think there's always a balance when you start photographing architecture, where do you want it to be abstract? Is it about the building, or is it about the lines, or about the surfaces? Is it about more than the actual image of a building? And in this case, I think the photographer did a good job of giving me enough of a building so it's not abstract. Because if we would have cropped in, I think it would have become too abstract, and you would have lost the diagonal lines of how you just turn the camera. Even though you would expect this image to be vertical. And again, having some of the desaturated yellows, and again, I don't know what color the building is, but it's still warm versus the cool. It always pulls the subject to the foreground, having that warm versus cool, and then not having any clouds, I think, makes it even more interesting to look at. I think that having a solid blue sky made the image stronger versus having clouds, which would have clashed with the image and would have taken away from the building in itself. And I gave this one an 8.
U.S. Air Force Academy Cadet Chapel.
Repetition. I think that's what kind of stood out for me here is the repetition. You don't know how many of these vertical pieces are in there. It just kind of goes on and on. And I think that one of the things that I think is important for photographers, because we're not doing motion, is the ability to be able to build a story outside of the frame. And so any way that we can do that, I think that makes the image bigger without it actually, we have only so much space to work with. We can't move our camera around versus motion. And so I think having the repetition can really help kind of navigate our ability to be able to have more than what the frame is. So I do appreciate being able to do that in this image. And again, just having the repetition of really looking at how those lines are being placed, going from one to the other. Again, I think it's nice that we don't have clouds back there. I think that it would have disrupted the overall image and the aesthetic of what was being achieved in this image. So Interesting. I liked it. Thank you. I give this one an 8.
The parallel lives of buildings.
You know, always looking for interesting images in Denver and trying to find them. I don't know, finding different ways to capture the architecture. You know, I'm sure we all see images from this area pretty often to try to find a way to be able to photograph it in something that's your own story, your own narrative, your own ability to be able to see it from your own viewpoint so you can tell your unique story, which I think you did here. I really appreciate almost these parallel lines here. I do like looking at, you know, using this as a framing mechanism to really kind of come over to this triangle over here. And again, sometimes I find that having something that's really bright pulls your eyes back here. But I think what's interesting here, using those squares of each of those squares in here also pulls your eyes back to here because of the size of those squares. So I think one of the things that I think is useful when doing photography is the ability to be able to use multiple or use shapes to be able to pull your eye from one place to another. And also having the size of the shape will also, the larger the square in this case, pulls your eye back to the front. So I think the photographer did a really good job of being able to use lots of design elements. I think for me, and I know this is a very little thing, I probably would have gotten rid of that down there or somehow darkened it a little bit. I don't think having just this little white spot down there helps anything versus where this adds a little bit of element of texture, some gradient, some contrast, which I think is useful. I just don't think that's happening down here. So I would just probably clone that out. The rest of it I think is great. And I gave this one. Y'all are making it difficult for me. This is some of the I've been judging this for a lot of years, and these are some of the best images I've seen in years. So really fun going through this. So it definitely made this a fun experience for me. And the images are great every year, but this year they're on point. So I appreciate that. And I gave this one a 10.
Populous.
So sitting with this one, and I was looking at this building this last weekend when I was in Denver. A couple of things about from my vantage point is it's an interesting image. What I ask myself is it an interesting image because the architect created it, or is it interesting images because of the way the photographer photographed it? I think it's well photographed. I think the interesting vertical lines. I would have liked to seen the photographer push a little harder at how they could create this instead of. I'm always careful because I don't want to steal someone else's copyright. I don't want to take someone else's artwork and make it my own. And so I'm always very careful about how I do that. Any building that is built after 1990, anything before 1990 is in the public domain. Anything after 1990, there is a copyright on it by whoever owns it, whether it's the architect or the person that bought the building and they bought the copyright from it. So those are the questions that I have. It's interesting, but again, for me, I think you could have pushed a little harder in making this your own. The other thing that I looked at, and I don't know if I have an opinion one way or the other, I would say the image is about a half a stop too dark. Good contrast. I think interesting contrast, good blacks, detail on the blacks, overall good zone. But I think you could have pushed the whites just a little bit more to add just a little bit more to it. But I gave this one a 7.
Looking up.
I think these names are just as fun as the images sometimes. So I personally, as a corporate photographer, I don't name my files, so I always really appreciate photographers that spend the time to think about what the story is beyond just the image, but also the title. So I thank you for that. Some interesting image here. I love the color, the deep blues, the deep yellows, the deep reds. To be able to look going back and forth. I think one of the questions that I have is I do a lot of printing. And so one of the questions I look at is, does this exceed the dynamic range of like an Epson printer or a Canon, one of the Canon Pro 2000s or 1000s or whatever printer it is? And that would be my only concern here, is that it may have challenges printing in the extreme saturation, and you'll start to lose detail. So that would be my main concern. And just so you all know, the image that I'm looking at on my screen, because I'm looking at it in my own Lightroom catalog here, is significantly better than what the screen in Zoom is showing. It's a little bit muddy and not quite as sharp. The image is tack sharp for me. Yeah, I love kind of the converging repetition of the yellows as it goes and keeps getting bigger, and so I can feel some depth in here. And so I think it's sometimes hard to do when you start thinking about an abstract image like this, and still being able to create some depth in it, which I think happened in this case. So I gave this one an 8.
Twisty Tower.
Another great name. I think the photographer did a great job of being able to find an angle that kind of gave your own narrative. I think you were able to really kind of push the story, and I think the title also shows that as well, of the story that you wanted to be able to tell about the specific building, which I think is interesting. Um, I think it is creative on the ability of where you photographed it, how you edited it, seeing the repetition of the windows. And again, I don't think this needed. I wouldn't want to see this image with good straight lines, good vertical lines. I'd like having this converging lines coming to the peak. I mean, they can help add to that wispiness, kind of showing the flow. I think one of the things I think that's always interesting is I think having this starts to show this waviness that happens here, kind of shows beauty and sleekness. I always think about when I used to ride motorcycles and you're going through the mountains and you're kind of going back and forth, and it's just like this nice flow to it and romanticized of about this ability. And I think you really kind of capture the ability to be able to kind of show that flow and really romanticize the building, which was really nice. Looking at the image, and again, the blacks are way blacker on my screen, just for everyone to know. I think the blacks are great. I think the blacks still show enough detail. I like seeing a bunch of stuff that's in zone 4, 5, and 6. I don't know if you needed a bunch that was in zone 10 or 9. So I really appreciated this image. I gave this one a 9.
You go ahead. I'll wait for the elevator.
Lots of interesting lines, lots of spiraling going on, lots of repetition. I'm not sure if I'm looking down. I'm not looking up immediately. I think one of the interesting things as you tried, as the photographer was making this somewhat abstract, but enough to be able to say that, oh, there's a staircase here. But I don't know if I'm looking down. Like, I think it gives the ability for the, I think one of the challenges photographers have in general is how do we keep somebody looking at an image longer? Whether it's through design elements or color or whatever it happens to be, the technique that you used or how you presented it. And in this case, I think you made it just abstractive enough that I wanted to spend more time on the image because I wanted to be able to see what I was looking at. I wanted to be able to ground myself, and you didn't allow me to ground myself, which I thought was great. So great job of making me uncomfortable looking at this image and spending more time. I think overall, I think you did a good job of the dynamic range from your lights to your darks. In a couple of places, it feels a little bit muddy. I wonder if it would have gone a little darker in here. It could have been challenging because you might have lost some detail, which I wouldn't have wanted to do. And some other things that I may consider is light bleed that's coming through here. Again, these are little tiny things that I may consider, but I might have cleaned some of this up if I was really going to go into detail and go into Photoshop. I don't think it adds to the story. A lot of times when I'm looking at images, I edit based off of the story that I'm trying to tell. It's not so much taking away from what's there. I always look at it when I photograph people of when I'm looking at a 2D, if I'm there in person, do I really see that light? And that's really coming from the camera, not necessarily from my eye. So a lot of times I clean a lot of that stuff up. I might have even cleaned that up and little things like that. But overall, fascinating image to look at, and I give this one a 9.
Vaulted Splendor.
Another image I sat on for a little bit looking at this image, and I am not a huge HDR fan, so just keep that in my mind. I feel like the dynamic range, I feel like the image overall is getting really flat. And so for me, I think my eyes go here a little too much, and I think it's a little too gray. I wonder what it would have happened if potentially we would have selected the sky and maybe added a little bit of color to it, maybe a little blue to show some juxtaposition between the warmth and the cool of the inside and the outside, to see what would have happened in that case. The other thing that kind of came to me is it starts to feel really washed out in here. For me, it would have been nice to have a little bit more of this. So that kind of gives it away that there's something going on here for me that's a little weird. So I may have selected in here and made these areas just a little bit darker, maybe not much, and maybe someone that doesn't shoot as often as we do may not notice, but I think it could have added an element of interest. What I do find interesting about the images, I am a huge dork for symmetrical images. I find them interesting. I don't feel like this image is boring. I think, again, you did a good job of having the symmetry of both of these sides, but then you're really creating a lot of visual weight down here by having this light here and having kind of this base. So it gives me the ability to be able to have grounding as I go through the image. The other thing I think that I would like to have color in here is there's a framing mechanism that's going on right here, which leads my eye to this very gray area. And I think that that's part of the problem I'm having with this image is it's just pulling me more into the center. And I think what's interesting in here is everything that's on the outside where the frame actually is I think is what is interesting in this image. And I gave this one a 7.
City light.
For y'all that can't see the image in person, the overall zones between zone 0 and zone 2 is spot on. Great detail between all of the zones here. I love seeing this go straight out to zone 10, but then getting into some of these areas down here in zone 0. So excellent job on the dynamic range of the image. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and you can't see it, at least I can't see it on this Zoom, but I can see it over here in my Lightroom catalog, is I even like seeing the outline of really bright white highlights along these edges, which you can't see. At least I can't see them on the Zoom, but I can see them over in my side. And I just like it, makes it feel like it's being backlit by the sun. I think it adds an element of interest. Again, I I think one of the things that's interesting for me is this poll right here is not the subject. But with that being said, I think the photographer did a really good job. For me, having this light go into this building kept it from being the highlight of the image. And it actually draws you in, but then you're looking at all of these gorgeous zones and awesome tonality that is happening throughout the image. And again, I don't need this image to be straight. I think this adds to the element of the story and creating a narrative is for really to be able to look at all of the shapes and the lines, the diagonal lines, and kind of giving us a sense of a story. The other thing is, it isn't an abstract image. It is telling me it's a building, but it's more than about a building. It's about the lines and the shapes and the dimensions of how I think I think it's a really nicely done job of really representing what the architects wanted to be able to show off in these images. And I do appreciate the one curved line right here that's really curved. I think it adds an element and kind of makes things stick out a little bit more, really to kind of showcase how everything is so straight in the image. And I gave this one a 10.
Going down.
So interesting use of lines. I like, again, trying to figure out how do we capture the space the architect wanted us to be able to see, or to be able to see things in a new way as a photographer. And I think it does a little bit of both. I think that it's interesting to be able to see how the staircase is going down and how we have those vertical lines that are kind of holding on. I don't know if they're like copper lines or what they are, but I think they are super interesting and they're creating leading lines, and sometimes you need a line that leads to something, and sometimes you just need lines that kind of bring you through the image, which I think is what's happening here. I think there's an interesting use of spiraling as I keep going down. You know, one of the things is instead of just kind of going down and keeping looping all the way down, having these straight lines on the way it was photographed kind of stops you and makes you pause at each of the sections before continuing down the spiral. So again, it allows the viewer to look at the image just a little bit longer. I love the textures that are happening over here. I love that you were able to maintain detail in areas that are really kind of feel like they should have been bright enough that it feels like there's a light there of some sorts. So I think that's interesting. And then I also like kind of seeing the mix of daylight and probably an outside window here. And so sometimes I like to see consistent color, but I think it adds an element of dimension and gives depth to the overall image by having kind of different Kelvin temperatures as you go throughout this, as well as having some blues. I think having this kind of leads your line in. And then sometimes, and I think I mentioned in one of the other architecture, these spots sometimes add an element of interest. And I think having them in this case, I think if this spot right here would have been here, I would have removed it. But because it's so close to the edge, it allows us to have some idea of the textures that are going on in that kind of area. But because it's so close that it doesn't pull your eye over there. So it's a good use of having spots to add texture, but not take away from the overall image. And I gave this one a 9.
Louisville office building.
So nicely done with strong vertical lines. You know, for me, as soon as I looked at this, out of all of the images, this one felt the most commercial. This felt like an advertisement of some sort of communications, but it felt like this should have been some sort of ad. So I really appreciated having the people. I think sometimes adding people to architecture can be challenging. I love seeing kind of a coffee cup of some sort in his hands. I think is visually interesting. Using kind of that rule of thirds is great. Also, what's nice is you can tell two different stories. If you would have had this person here going that same direction, it tells a completely different story. Sometimes, I think often we want to see where people are walking to. And if you have a person over here and you can't see where they're walking to, it makes the image a little darker, a little sadder, versus over here where they're kind of walking and you kind of see where they're walking, kind of adds an element of happiness, a little bit more joy, like they're going someplace, they're excited about life. So I think that's interesting. So not only having the rule of thirds is interesting, but also having this diagonal line right where the escalator is really kind of pushing our eyes to him. So I think that was well done. I think having his feet just slightly up adds motion so it doesn't feel like he's just standing there. It feels purposeful. I think the colors are good. Having kind of the hard contrast here of those blacks. And again, maybe not on purpose, but kind of because you're in windows. And as you go behind the windows, it made the blacks not as black. And so it really kind of made the blacks of him stand out, which pushes him away from the space. And often what happens when you photograph something, instead of coming from a corner where you show depth, when you shoot it like this, oftentimes it becomes two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional. But having him where he's at, showing good contrast, creates that depth that we know that he's in the foreground to the background. Also kind of having it going up here. So there's lots of interesting elements here. And overall, nicely done. Give this one a 10.
Domed ceiling framed by arches.
I don't know if we're supposed to spend so much time looking at images before I critique. I looked at this image longer than any other image today when I was going through the images. This is my favorite image. I don't know if we're supposed to have it. This one was the most interesting image for me. And the reason why is every time I look at it, it moves. It physically moves on me. And I don't know why that happens. I'm sure there's some effect that's occurring. But if I move my eye away from it and I look back at it, I can actually see it getting bigger coming to me. It almost feels like an animated GIF, even though it's a 2D image and there's no motion to it. I think the way you photograph this created motion that I haven't seen in an image in a long time. It happens every once in a while, depending on, different effects that happen in imagery. Anyway, this was by far my favorite image. The way that it just physically moves at me every time I look away and look at back of the image. Beyond that, interesting use of lines, an interesting use of, I don't even know what I'm looking at. This is a completely abstract image, and maybe if I knew more about the building, I would understand it. But for me, it's an abstract. So anyway, 10 without a doubt.
A choir of quiet lights.
Again, I think one of the elements that we find interesting is repetition, and then we also having the size of the object, having the same object in the image over and over again also creates a sense of depth. I don't know if we were, I mean, the building is what it is, but if we didn't have those lamps in there, I think it would be hard to tell depth. And so I think as human beings, we look for similar objects and repetition of similar objects and having it go farther back and see them getting smaller. Also as they overlay on top of each other, also gives it the effect of depth as well. What I find interesting in this image is the photographer making a decision to isolate this one where every other one overlaps. And I think that this makes, not only is it the biggest image, it's also separated from the rest. So I think it draws the eye. I do like some of the interesting shadows here. And again, I don't know if I could have cropped this differently. A couple of things different here for me is I really like the lighting that's happening over here. So I think you could have a couple different subjects. If I would have cropped it here and maybe here, it would have made it more about the lamps, the lights that are here, versus without cropping it that way and having it this. It's more about the structure and more about how the building is interweaving with the lamps. And even though you have this one as the most dominant one in separation, what I don't like about it is how dark it is. You're telling me as the viewer to look at this one lamp more than the rest, then it's too dark. So I wonder if I might have at least tried, and again, I don't know if it would have worked, is to maybe brighten areas like this up a little bit to kind of make the effect a little bit stronger, because you're telling me that's what you want me to look at, whether it's on purpose or on accident. So for me, I gave this one a 7.
Now boarding for Planet Nikon. And after this image, we'll go and pause and talk to the people who got 9s and 10s so far.
Again, love seeing people in here. I think it's always interesting. One of the things I kind of sit on as I'm looking at this image is where the people are. I think you did a good job of creating this line into the space here. And I started thinking what would happen if we had people down here, and what would happen, what would the story be, depending on where you captured the people in the shot. As I was sitting there thinking about, though, is I really kind of like these kind of diagonal lines that are happening right here over and over again, which is also leading our line into here. So I think it's a good use of negative space that helps the viewer really kind of lead into the image. And sometimes I think having that much negative space might draw away and push the viewer's eye down here. But I think you did a good job, not only with the kind of diagonal lines, but having kind of this dark line here, as well as this line going this way, really does push you up to be able to see the people. And I think it's fun having those people in this. Again, a space that we see often photographed. Again, you know, an architect that built this building. Are we creating our own image? And I think absolutely. And I think the photographer did a good job of being able to create his own narrative, a thorough narrative in the image. I love seeing the separation here between that part of the museum with this part of the museum. So it really kind of starts to isolate this out, and this all becomes the subject here, which I think is really nice. So really nicely done. And I gave this image a 9.
All right, Paul, you can take a short break, have a glass of water, whatever you need to do. And we'll peek at the 9s and the 10s. So we're going back here to Lines of Sight from Cecilia Zapata.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Paul, for the comments and the feedback. So back in June, my daughter actually lost her eyesight in her left eye. And so she spent 6 days, 5 nights at St. Luke's Presbyterian downtown in Denver. And I stayed with her all except for one night, but was looking outside the window the first day and decided to bring my camera the next day. And this building was right across the way, and it's the Kaiser the Kaiser Franklin office. And so that's what that building is across the street. But thank you for the feedback.
It's a great image, Cecilia. Love it. Monumental Architecture by Robert Mills is from Todd Lytle.
I was in DC last month. In fact, I took that a month ago yesterday. And to me, what was interesting, I hadn't been to Washington, DC in almost 50 years. High school when I went last. Okay, more like 100 years. But the scale and size of many, many things in DC really just kind of overwhelmed me. I'm at the very, very furthest west end of the mall. So that's right on the steps of the Lincoln Monument. It's 8/10 of a mile to the Washington Monument. And then the Capitol building is an additional 1.6 miles behind that. So you're looking at almost 2.5 miles front to back. And I've always wanted to go and shoot some things there, and it was a very fun 3 days. And it doesn't show up great here, but the other thing I learned when I stood next to it is that it was built in 2 or 3 different phases, 2 major phases with 3 different quarries of supposed to be white marble. You can see that middle section just above to the left of the Capitol building is a little bit more, they call it blue marble than white. But those are 3 different quarries, and it stood only about a third of its total height for, I don't know, like 25 years or 50 years, something crazy. So it's 555 feet tall.
Nice.
Good shot.
Nice. Thanks, Todd. Gaudi's Kaleidoscope is from Kevin McCulloch.
Yeah, this one, Jordan and I were in Barcelona last month and stumbled across this little cathedral. If you guys have been, it's massive. So I think it's actually the largest cathedral or soon to be in the world. So Gaudi really puts an emphasis on color and light in his architecture, and this was really cool. It was hands down my favorite church I've ever been in. So I think Jordan practically had to drag me out of it from taking all the photos there. So very cool. Thank you so much for the comments and the feedback on it.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
How did you shoot this? Did you put your camera on the ground, or what? Like, were you holding?
No, I was standing, but it was sort of like waist level pointed up to capture that. So, and yeah, it was definitely darker on the right side of the image, so I had to lighten that a little bit to make it a little more consistent. But yeah, I didn't have to do the full lay down thing. I think Jordan would have left me there at that point.
It's probably the only existing picture of Sagrada Familia that doesn't have another person in
it. True.
Great shot.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is wonderful, and Kaleidoscope name was very fitting for that. That's beautiful. This one, the Parallel Lives of Buildings, is from Kyle Durlam.
Thank you, Paul, so much for the feedback and the comments. I shot this in July. That's the Denver Art Museum, Republic Plaza, and the Denver Library kind of all mashed together. And I drew inspiration from the presentation we had in March that Frank Varney gave us from a lot of his architecture photography. In fact, I was so inspired by that program for the shot that I swear he had one in his presentation that was similar to this, and I didn't want to submit this until I watched his presentation over again, just to make sure I wasn't totally ripping him off. And it turns out he didn't have one like this, so I submitted it, and I'm really honored to have gotten the score it got. Thank you, Paul.
And Twisty Tower is from Joy Lindholm.
Yeah, thanks so much for the comments. This was taken this past May. This is the TELUS Sky Tower in Calgary, Alberta. It's such a fascinating building. I'm not usually a skyscraper nerd, but when I first saw this, I had to just explore more. You kind of approach it from every angle and it moves. And thanks, Paul, for talking about the waves, because it feels like a hologram almost. Every angle is a very different expression. I thought I had to dig in and kind of do some research about it because I was so interested. It was designed by a Danish architecture company that their goal was to try to make it look like a lady in a sea of cowboys. So standing in, a little bit of a feminine silhouette against the straight up and down of the skyscrapers around it. So really captured my interest, and I am, glad that you all appreciate it. Thanks.
Great shot, Joy.
Yeah, that's a really cool image. Cool building too. You go ahead. I'll wait for the elevators from Aaron Alfinger.
Hi, this was taken on a recent business trip to Chicago. The staircase is found in a building called the Rookery. It is designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and his trust is held there in the lobby. So they do tours, even though the building is like condos and mixed use. I did not plan to go. I had taken a half day before a business trip to go and do some architecture photography there, but it was April and my outdoor photography plans were foiled by snow. But so I was really happy to have stumbled into this. Thank you so much for the comments. I have several versions of this. Some are color, some are black and white, some are at angles, and I obsessed so much over which one to submit that I didn't even see the light points that are such distractions in the stairs. I'm totally kicking myself now. Completely agree. Can't believe I missed that. But thank you so much for the feedback and the 9.
Congrats, Aaron. This was a cool image. City Light is from Steve Wilton.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It's for the detailed feedback. All night you've been given great detailed reactions. Anyway, this is in Denver. It's taken with an iPhone 12. It's just looking up at a projects I was doing at the time, just personal project of streetlights. It was a great day, as you can see. Like getting the sun peeking around that building really intrigued me. Thank you.
Really impressive, Steve.
Yeah, this is another great black and white from you, Steve. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Going Down is from Stuart Little.
Yeah, hi. This one is from Glasgow in Scotland, and it's called the Lighthouse, and it's in the middle of the town, but which I don't understand quite how it gets to be a lighthouse there, but I think it's because of the nearby rivers. Anyway, I love the spiral staircase. The only thing I wish I had, and I appreciate your comments earlier about having people in the picture, is I wish I had somebody walking down the steps in this. But I really enjoyed this picture, and I thought it would be good for this competition. So thank you for your comments and the score.
Louisville Office Building is from Kiefer Hunterford. I take it Kiefer's not with us this evening. He wrote a note here, said that a photo that I've always liked from a few years ago, shot in Louisville. I'm an open source advocate, so edited on Linux in Darktable to fix the parallax and pull out the colors, and then some editing in GIMP to clean up litter of other distractions. So not the traditional operating systems and editing software that we are all used to. And a heck of a result, though. Paul's favorite so far, dome ceiling framed by arches from Oz Feniger.
I took us in Uzbekistan when I went to Central Asia. This is an old building. It was very dark inside, and I used my iPhone, very wide angle. There are arches on the side, and I cropped those out so that the center would be the center of focus. And then, presented it as an abstract. I thought the shadows added a little more reality to it. I played with contrast, eliminated a few distracting things. That's about it.
That's a really cool image, Oz. Awesome. Love that it was shot with a phone, too.
Yeah.
And now boarding for Planet Nikon is from Terry Hanford. Usually he joins us via Zoom, but not tonight. He said that he recently participated in a Denver photography meetup sponsored by Nikonians. Nikonians is a website, for those who don't know, that has been around for a long time. They have a lot of local meetups. He said that my wife said the Nikonian sounded like a space alien in a Star Trek movie. I thought her notion was ridiculous until I saw the spaceship. Very cool. All right, well, that was that group of 9s and 10s. We can get back to the rest of them. This is Bernie's Service Center.
One of the challenges I find that people have when photographing an image is that sometimes a properly exposed image is overexposed. But when you kind of have more of a low key image, sometimes it feels underexposed. And I think this is really well captured from the standpoint of, it feels like it's sunset. I'm assuming sunset, the clouds are coming in, maybe the clouds kind of opened up. I think there's a story that it's going on here in the space. I like the warm versus the cool. I love opportunities where the sun just basically parts for a second. And again, I don't know what happened here, but I love that opportunity where the sun just parts momentarily when all of these dark clouds. I think the juxtaposition between those two are fabulous. I think overall, it's all about the light here and the shadow. And I think kind of the time of day when it was shot really kind of lends itself to the building. So really enjoy this image. I gave this one a 10.
In Awe.
Good name, good title. I think shooting it low, kind of shooting slightly up, kind of from the ant's eye view. I think it really lends itself to kind of you wanting to show off the vastness, the greatness, how large it is. And the space, certainly using a slightly wider lens kind of really pushes the background a little farther away, making the space look even larger, which I think is interesting. Using the kind of darkness on the outside of all of where the seats are as it kind of goes in, kind of gives its foundation. Lots of interesting lines. I think this is a leading line to subject to all of the fascinating artwork back there. So I think you did a good job of being able to capture I think what the architect would want. So I gave this one a 9.
Walking through Colorado history.
Good time of day. I think I am a fan of purple skies. I know that may sound odd, but most of the time when I shoot landscapes, I'll actually change the hue just a couple points to the right with the blues, just because I like having just a little bit of purple, not so much that anybody notices, but just a little bit. But that's just my own personal aesthetic. Interesting place to shoot from. It would have been interesting. I don't know. I think for me, what I think stands out is the color, the rust on the building, which I think is interesting. I also think that keeping this here, I think is useful. because it basically pushes your eye this way and it just kind of forces you instead of not knowing what's over here. You basically told the viewer, don't look over here. It's just a tree. Let's look at what we want to actually look at, which is kind of, some history of Colorado, which I think is interesting. And I gave this one an 8.
Nice Savannah home.
Interesting time of day. I think the light's fabulous, good color. I think having that kind of warmth of the brick and the blue of the background is interesting. I think I would have liked to seen a little bit more breathing. It feels very collapsed. For me, I start to feel a little claustrophobic. I also think that it would have been interesting to see at this point, because you're so close to being vertical, what I would have probably done is just stepped away a little bit, photographed it from the angle that you were at, and then made sure that you transform these lines, whether in Photoshop or in Lightroom, so you actually get really strong vertical lines. I don't want the building falling back. I want the building to have more stature. I think it lends itself to being a little bit more here. Interesting building. I don't know if this even bothers me having the tree up there. It looks like it's kind of springish. I think the trees are starting to get some, the leaves are starting to grow on the branches. I think it kind of adds an element of depth. So having it in there for me is kind of interesting. I would give this one an 9.
Girders and glass.
So you have in the foreground some really strong lines here, right? That's kind of like what really stands out to me. Because the beams are so big in relationship to what's behind it, and because it's separated from anything else, because nothing else is overlaying it. Like here, when you start looking back here, everything's being overlaid by something else. And so for me, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to be looking at. I still think it's an interesting image, and I still think that having all of the repetition of the lines, even these curved lines over here, I think are interesting. I wonder if there was a way that it feels too desaturated for me. There's got to be a way to create some depth and maybe adding a little bit more blue, a little bit more warmth, maybe shooting at a different time of day. Some interesting things that are happening on the glass over here is some of the waves that are happening, which I think is interesting. Seeing more of that to be able to make that more pronounced. Or maybe even, again, one of the things I may play with in Lightroom is what would have happened if we would have darkened all of this up so it wasn't so prominent, so my eyes can actually lead in. Because initially, this is almost becoming a framing mechanism, but I think because it's so bright, my eyes having trouble going into the image. And I wonder if you would have darkened, or maybe what would have happened if you would add a little bit of vignette on the outside, so my eyes were automatically drawn more to the center instead of staying on the outside of the frame. And I gave this one a 7.
Soon to scrape the Crete sky.
So one of the things I thought about is, is it a big deal that the crane was cropped off over here? And what I think is nice about not showing me the entire crane or what else is over here is that by cropping it like you did, for me, it doesn't become the subject. The subject actually becomes more of this down here, all the intricacies of all the lines that are down there, which I think is interesting. And so I appreciate not seeing the entire crane, because I don't think the crane's supposed to be the subject. I think the rooftop of this building is super interesting watching and looking at it. I want to really spend time looking at what's going on in there. I think having these clouds here, having these horizontal lines, all of that, I think lends itself to pushing my eye down, which I think makes the image more interesting. Also having kind of that kind of wide angle, keeping the vertical line straight, I think is interesting. And this for me, I get to spend some time down there. So for me, I gave this one a 9.
Lights sculptural dance.
Lots of interesting lighting, good time of day. I like seeing all of the shadows that are happening down here, seeing the repetition as it goes back. I think for me, that's the most important part of the image. I think the image could have been a little bit stronger by getting rid of this. I don't know if you needed anything below this. And I think all of a sudden, if you did that, it would make it more about what's over here. But then what I think is interesting is having some of the building over here as well. So you're looking at kind of taking your eye, you're going a little bit left, a little bit right. So for me, I would have just cropped it off, and I think this image would have been significantly stronger. I gave this one a 7.
Legacy walls.
Good vertical lines. Really liked how strong the space that you're in, I think, really lends itself to wanting to see those vertical lines and the repetition of all of the people back there. You know, using this to bring your eye into the frame, and then using this section to pull your eye up to where you're looking at all of the people on the walls and the prominence those people had in that period of time back there. Did a good use of having some good blacks, good clarity, good textures. I really like seeing some light ball back here. So it's giving some depth and some weight to the image. I also think it's good that you're able to show some of that so that it didn't overlap so much that you start to lose kind of what was below this level. So super interesting image. And I gave this one 9. And the zoom doesn't do the image justice as far as the tonality.
Library of Congress, Great Hall, Beaux Art.
This was one of the images that I felt more HDR. I don't know if it is or not, but loved it. I think this is an excellent use of this like really, really large tonal range in your image, which I thought was super interesting. And of course, all of the repetition of all of the curves in here over and over again, you know, by doing what you did really kind of lend itself to keep pushing me in. So everything becomes this leading line and kind of having this kind of effect happen as you keep going in with the shapes over and over and over again. Also kind of gives me kind of this idea of a kaleidoscope. I gave this one a 9.
The same, but different.
Love the flatness of this image. I love the 2D effect. And I think the other thing that I found interesting about this is actually the windows. You know, where it was dark versus where it was bright. You know, things that are, you know, the everything being pulled down and there being opened up. I think that was fascinating. Even down here, having none of them open kind of built some strength down at the bottom and gave it some level of base. I even like being able to see just a little bit down here to know that there was more down here. I don't know how big the building is, but I love the repetition. Having all of the darks here, and then you're having all of the window shades down, and then kind of a splattering of a little between. It's almost like a tic-tac-toe or a Connect Four. I think it was an interesting play. It feels like you want to interact with it. So for me, this kind of felt like a Connect Four type of situation, and gave this one a 9.
Sky mushrooms.
Interesting building, fun architecture. And again, because of the type of building is, I don't know if I need vertical lines here. So that doesn't bother me. And I think it's a good time of day. I like seeing the light right here. The light over here is super interesting. I love the long shadows. I like that you kind of showed up when you did. I don't even know if I mind how bright it is over here. I think the biggest change that I would have is I need just a little bit more down here. I think I just need just just a little bit, a centimeter or two. To give me a little bit more placement of where I am, only because of all of these vertical lines that are here, that I think I needed it. Those vertical lines weren't there, it wouldn't have bothered me, and I might have even cropped up tighter, but the people are there, so I just give it a little bit more space. And I gave this one an 8.
Column Forest.
It feels like one of those you kind of walk into and you're not sure where you're supposed to go. It's almost like mirrors everywhere, which I think is interesting. Let me see if I can find this image because there was something on this. Trying to find it as quick as possible. There it is. I probably would have liked to seen like this line right here, and I don't know if everything is straight in this area, but for me, I would have transformed this so this was completely vertical. I think the image would have been a little stronger because I think this side over here is actually vertical. I think it was just the way the camera was tilted. I would have made this stronger and tilted it up just a little bit. Interesting colors as far as like everything slightly desaturated, like all of these kind of rusty tones in there. I also like the use of being able to see that statue pretty clearly, but no other kind of statues in the place. Interesting use of vertical lines over and over again. And I gave this one an 8.
Form ever follows function.
Um, so I like what's interesting about this is I actually over here in Lightroom, I actually looked to see if these lines are straight, and the lines are perfectly straight, but sometimes when you make a line so straight, sometimes it doesn't feel straight. So I would have probably compensated one way or the other. So this particular one wasn't as straight. These lines are straight over here, which I think is nice. I really like having this line, kind of the diagonal line coming in here. I like that my eye kind of really goes to those strong rectangular shapes in the background, the stark contrast between, the zone, probably somewhere between 2 and 8, somewhere in between there. So nice strong contrast, having the foundation of the darks on the outside. I think even having some of this, I might have, just for the heck of it, straighten these up. So I might have pulled up the transform just a little bit on this side to make that very specifically straight over there. But otherwise, super interesting image. Give this one an 8.
Norwegian Community House.
Abstract, because I don't know if I'm looking at it on the wall, on the ceiling. I don't know how big this is or how small it is. Um, so for me, I think the photographer did a good job of really kind of getting in tight enough that I don't know quite what I'm looking at. In some ways, I think the only thing for me is to see a little bit more contrast. I wish the whites would have been a little whiter, maybe a little bit brighter to kind of add some stark contrast in those whites. They start to feel a little muddy for me. Not yellow, but kind of creamy whitish. I think I would have liked it more in zone 7-ish. Right now, those whites are like in zone 6 in this area right here. So I think brightness would have helped it a little bit. And I gave this one a 7.
Denver Art Museum.
I'm looking at this one. There it is. Interesting time of day. I think this building does a really good job of kind of giving this kind of romanticized lighting effect that happens off of some of the sides of this building. I really love the wispiness of the clouds in the background. I think it lends itself to the story, which I think is interesting. I think you crafted it in a good place. You're giving me just enough of breathing room that it doesn't feel like it's too tight. This is dark enough that I like having it back there, but it doesn't become a focal point. So my eyes are always drawn over into this nice, interesting lighting back here. And I gave this one an 8. Again, always a difficult building to photograph because it gets photographed so often.
Glass bricked skyline. And once again, after this one, we'll go look at 9s and 10s.
I'll start off with this one. This one was a 10 for me. Phenomenal job. Sorry. I absolutely love the ability to you gave me 5 images. Right. And so I'm not just looking at a image, I'm looking at 5 different images with 5 different spaces. And I absolutely love that. I love kind of the desaturated look. It kind of tells a story. Each one of these squares, it's his own story. And so for me, I find that absolutely fabulous. Instead of doing, you think about putting 5 images together, you did it all in one shot. It tells one story and then it tells all individual stories in it. So absolutely love this image. So I 10.
Fantastic. All right, we're going back to Bernie's Service Center. I need to jump ahead about 3 or 4. Is that it? There we go. Bernie's Service Center is from Dave Hull. And I know Dave is not here this evening. He sent me an email. Dave actually moved out to Fruita early this summer. Still a member, though, still going strong. He said this building is in Fruita, Colorado. Records show that it was established in 1959, but sadly it is no longer in business. I like the warm tone generated by the late summer setting sun, and for me, the various clutter around the building added to its story of disuse. In Awe is from Barbara Masonville.
Thank you, Paul, for your comments. I really appreciate it. This church was in Macon, Georgia, and this image I had actually submitted for my placement in the club. So thank you to the committee for your tweaks on it. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Good work, Barbara. Nice. Nice Savannah Home is from Bill Rothenmeyer.
Obviously, I took that in Savannah. I took it the day that it really became apparent that we were having a pandemic. It was right in that period. Savannah is a wonderful city to walk around, especially when there's not a pandemic. Architecture is wonderful, and just the parks and the way that the city is laid out.
Thank you, Bill. Soon to Scrape the Crete Sky is from Rick Carter.
Thank you, Paul, for your comments. The crane really, it stands out right there, but it is part of the architecture of a structure, I suppose, while it's in progress, at least. In the skies, it was in Crete in April this year, and there's a lot of beautiful things there. Thank you for your comments.
Fun job, Rick.
Yeah, it's a cool image. Legacy Walls is from Cecilia Zapata.
Thanks for the comments, Paul. This was taken at the state capitol, downtown Denver. I was on a tour, took it with my iPhone. Thank you.
Good job.
I love seeing all these great iPhone images this evening. It's great. Library of Congress Great Hall Beaux Art is from Todd Lytle.
Yes, as I mentioned, I was in Washington, D.C. This was taken a month ago tomorrow. So 2 days apart from the other one. It's the Great Hall, which is the Thomas Jefferson Building. I guess that was the original Library of Congress. The Library of Congress now spans just some massive footprint, and a lot of the books will come in through conveyor belts and things from blocks and blocks away. But that's the main hall. And I waited till just about everybody had left. It closed at 5, just a few minutes before, and there's a marker on the center of the floor that says where the center is, and I laid down, which is always a little risky in a government building. Straight up, it's handheld. I think it was a 50th of a second.
Really cool.
Was it an iPhone?
No, it was not an iPhone. That was my 14 millimeter. I think I shot it at f9, but my 14 to 28 2.8.
Olympus, right?
Yeah, and that was fairly high ISO. I don't remember 1200 or 2000. So I did denoise. It was denoised, but it was just a fabulous trip.
That's nice. It's nice that they put a little marker on the floor for you. It kind of reminds me of Disney World. Used to have these signs that said Kodak Picture Spot. You you'd see so many tourists just walking by, because I lived in Florida for almost 30 years. You'd see people just walking by and they'd stand right in front of that sign and just point their camera and they got the same picture that a million other people did.
We still taking pictures.
Exactly, yep. The same but different is from Gary Witt.
This image is of a building in Seattle. My daughter lives in Seattle and she's on about the 20th floor of a building across from this. And that's the true perpendicular side of that building. As you wrap left and right, it sort of angles back. So it got weird as far as the perspective. And so as I was looking at this image, I loved and this is in color, believe it or not. I did not convert this to black and white. I did convert it to black and white and really tried to play up the zones, and I didn't like how white it got. It made it just seem not normal. So I left it as it was. I did have a couple of windows that had Post-it stickers on them that were bright white, and one of them made a diagonal across one of the windows, which I hated, so I took that out. I for the most part, didn't play around with where the blinds were or were not, but those Post-its really drove me nuts. But I played around with titles like your Connect Four. I was trying to come up with some deco checkerboard or something. I was trying to come up with some title, but anyway, I appreciate your
You know what
comments.
building that is?
I do not know the name of it.
There's a silver.
Actually, Stuart Little just typed in the chat in Zoom. He thinks it's a Smith building.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
Very nice shot, Gary. And this is a really cool shot too. Glass bricked skyline from Kyle Durlam.
And really touched by your guys' enthusiasm, and thank you so much. This is the only shot tonight that we've seen so far taken from inside the Denver Art Museum, from inside the Martin building. I was there on some Saturday in August with the Metro Denver photography meetup group that I'm a part of, and we were just walking. This is a 7th floor of the Martin building. We were just walking from the little observatory up there, and I don't know. We were like, I don't know. We were kind of the end of the walk, and we were all sort of like tired. And I just saw this, and I was like, "Holy crap!" Anyway, I took probably a dozen different pictures trying to get it lined up just like I wanted for this. Can we call it a quint tip? I don't know. A diptych, triptych, quint tip? I don't know. I'm just making that up. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
It's five different. They weren't all in that perfect space.
Oh, I didn't touch a thing. This is practically right out of the canvas. There's 5 glass bricks there, and they're at about like somewhere between belly button and chest level. And I had to, get in position and really size it up. I mean, I wanted the Capitol anchor in it on one side and the library anchor on the other side, and it took some work actually. But yeah, no, there's no tomfoolery going on here.
Tomfoolery. Very cool. Very nice. At this point, we've got about 25 images left and about 45 minutes left for our normal meeting time. Can we just take a quick 3-4 minute break?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll be back in a few minutes and then we'll continue on and finish up the evening. This is 3 high.
Sorry, give me a second. I lost.
Yep.
There you go. Okay. So I think the initial things that kind of come out to me is I really like the separation between these two this right here. I like kind of seeing that space. I think it's super interesting to be able to see that. I think it kind of adds to it. I do like that it's got some abstraction to it, but we do know that they're buildings. I like having kind of this diagonal line here. I like seeing that it's just leading my eye up to this other building. I love seeing that stark blue sky. I think one of the nice things about having blue skies sometimes is that it takes a 3D and makes it flat, which I think really kind of pushes the overall design elements of an image. Then rather than making it about a particular building, but about the lines of the building, the design of the building, which I think is interesting. I'm going to give this one a 7. Sorry, 8. Take that back. 8.
In at Rodance.
What was the name of it? What was the title again, Carl?
The Inn at Rodance.
Okay. I think for me, this one, I think I don't like seeing the building falling backwards. I want to be able to use this as a line to come up to this strong building of some sorts back there. So I would transform this one to make sure that those lines were vertical there. And I don't know if I minded. Something that I would have considered is how this line here of this fence interacts with this line here. Whether or not it should or shouldn't, I don't know. I would have played with it as a photographer out there if I was there shooting it. I feel like there's something kind of, I don't know, muddy in the background. So I'm not sure what's going on here. The contrast seems a little off in this image. It's worse on Zoom. And so I'm not sure. There's almost like a color haze in the foreground, almost kind of duotoned in some ways, with kind of a blue and the warmth of the yellows. For this one, I gave this one a 7.
Portal of Wonder.
Super interesting. The vertical diagonal lines on this. I wish we were seeing all on the Zoom how much texture is here. The crispiness of those lines are almost surreal in the image. And even having kind of like this V's over and over again all the way up is super interesting. For me, this image is about the texture of those vertical lines. Just phenomenal. So I give this one a 9.
Second City Skywalk.
I love the angle that this is coming from. I think the biggest challenge is because of the way my eyes are looking. My eye goes to this right here, the brightness here, which is in my screen, it's a little worse. I think that it feels like it was the selection wasn't great. I love the angle of this. I think that whoever photographed it should go back and clean up the masking on that edge right there, because I think it would make the image significantly better. Just because my eye is going to it so much, it's happening here as well. I think that just by a little bit more Photoshop work, I think this image would be stunning. So same thing here. So I think it just needs a little bit of Photoshop work in masking. And I gave this one a 7.
Mansion Steps to the Lake.
Kind of fun to see an image that has so much contrast in it. I mean, you're going from zone 0 and then you have a little bit in the middle, but really then just jumping up to that zone 10, kind of giving this kind of like middle of the night, nighttime kind of aesthetic. It definitely has some sort of story. You see a line leading up here, really strong horizontal lines in here. Um, Certainly an interesting image. For me, what was interesting is it's not quite symmetrical, um, but has some symmetry to it. Interesting image. I'll give it an 8.
Star Trek inspired.
Definitely feels Star Trek inspired. Interesting gold versus the blue, feeling the separation between foreground and background, having all of the lines and the spots of the planets and the stars and constellations in the background is really kind of what's going on here. I wonder if we would have gone a little lower with the shot just to kind of seen. It's almost like I want to feel like I'm in the space. I think part um, of the goal, at least for me, what it would have been is like what it would have been like for me being able to be in the space, being able to experience this space. And so for me, just coming down just a little bit, I don't know if having this up here gives anything extra. So physically just coming down just a bit, so it feels like I could be standing here looking out over the edge there. And I gave this one an 8.
Kansas house, stormy day.
Very, very strong oranges, as we can see, and yellows. There certainly see the textures. Looking at the storminess of the background. I think the vignette could have been a little less for me, but that's my own personal preference there. Um, I wish that I could have gone back a little bit. Again, feels a little too tight. I feel a little claustrophobic here. Feeling a little bit more of the space would have been nice, and I think it would have made the building be a little bit more stature, and it would have given me a little bit more sense of where I was. Color is kind of fun, though. I gave this one an 8.
Reaching up.
I like that this one doesn't have a lot of color. I know I can see the blue in between. Talk about a structure where the leading lines go to a focal point. I don't know what better image I've seen today that where you're really wanting to lead your eye to where most of the color is, where the yellow is, where the sun's coming up, where the blues. So for me, good job at capturing and really kind of showing off those leading lines, but then also using that framing mechanism here, using the repetition of kind of the spiral all the way around the image, I think is super interesting. Um, Fun image. I'm curious to see what would happen if we chopped it off here. Just is it adding anything by having more? Can you get away with having less? So we can kind of bring us in a little bit more. I don't know. And at the end, I might have done exactly what the photographer did as well. And I gave this one an 8.
Right angle curve.
Lovely lighting. The shadows. I love the shadows here. I love the cool versus the warm. And it's really kind of more of a green bluish. I really like kind of that desaturation look. With the kind of that wall, whether you desaturate it or not, or was like that in real life. I love how structured this is right here. And I love seeing those curves over here and those diagonal lines. It's really about all of the shapes and the design elements in here rather than about the building, which I think is fabulous. I love watching photographers that can really kind of capture more than what the building is, but things that I think a lot of people miss that I would think you were able to capture here. And I'll give this one a 10.
If you can't bring the house to the mountain, bring the mountain to the house.
This is surreal. This is a very surreal image. The softness of the color, the flatness of the image. And I can't think of the name of I'm too tired right now, but there is a photographer and the guy that does movies, and I don't know why I can't think of his name right now, kind of has a similar effect. Great use of lines, good place of a horizon line, just enough grass to show me kind of where I'm leading into. I love that it's not a symmetrical image, but you put the door in the middle, and really kind of using this to kind of have the asymmetrical weight, making the image super interesting. I like kind of seeing the juxtaposition between these two, the window and the door. The clouds are adding to that surrealism, making it feel even more like kind of out of a movie. For me, this is a 10.
So this is a kind of a Wes Anderson. Is that who you're?
Thank you.
All
Boy,
right.
that was rough. Yes, thank you. It's been a long day. Yes, it has a very Wes Anderson aesthetic.
Nice. Knock, knock.
Fun name. Um, kind of has a, I think the first thing that kind of comes to me is that it's kind of an entryway, kind of like a vacation shot. It feels a little bit more corporate, which is kind of nice. Sometimes to be able to kind of have that type of image where you could see it being used in a magazine to be able to promote a vacation. So that's the kind of the first kind of story that for me, I see. Nice time of day. I like being able to see again. In this particular case, you're using the shadows to show me more of the space without having to give me a wider shot. You have the frame here, but having these shadows adds the extra story to it. So I think you're adding story, you're giving me narrative, you're kind of building more into this without actually showing me what's outside the frame, but still doing it. So nicely done there. Again, another symmetrical image, but you're still using kind of the shadow up here to kind of add that asymmetrical feel to it so it doesn't become static, makes it more dynamic. Again, leading into the shot, I think is interesting, and I'll give this one a 9.
Eastern Plains of Colorado.
Um, Gorgeous colors in this foreground. That richness of that grass, I think, is really, really interesting. Let me go find the image on my screen. I like how you use this wood to kind of frame it into here. And I would even say my eye kind of jumps back between both of these spots, just because of the size of the dead wood that's on the ground. And I actually think it keeps movement happening in an image, so you don't just get stuck here and get bored with the image. So I think it really kind of helps, lending itself not only to creating kind of that effect of framing into the image, but also making my eye come back out to really kind of look at the textures of the wood, which I think kind of adds to the narrative of the story. Even having this kind of lends itself to coming in. I think one of the things that for me, that is really just my only downside is I'm not a huge fan of having cyan skies. I know it occurs. I usually go in there and kind of modify them. I don't know if I care for the significant change between the purple and the cyan back there, but again, super interesting image. And I give this one an 8.
Plain Shaker Village White.
So I think the first thing that stands out for me is that it's underexposed for me personally. It feels like it's about to stop underexposed. When I see sun and then I see a white wall, I want to see us hitting zone 7, 7.5, maybe even a little bit of 8s there occasionally if it's a white wall. So for me, it's a 3/4 of 2, a full stop underexposed. But beyond that, super interesting juxtaposition. I like how you put the building over here, but then use the balance of the image by adding these buildings over here. So I think there's some really interesting things going on. The other thing that could be happening, the other thing that goes through my mind when looking at this image, and I'm not sure of the effect of what you're going for. In this case, depending on the narrative you're trying to tell, it almost feels like it's almost like moonlight. Because of how dark the image is how the image is underexposed, that it could almost be a moonlit image rather than a daylight image. Certainly based off the color of what I'm looking at, where the shadows are. So interesting image. And so I'd give this one an 8.
Reflected Reflections.
I think this one's all about tonality. I think for me, what I'm really looking at as from an artist standpoint, and me being an artist, what I want to go through and I'm looking at is all the different tonalities that live in here. The amount of different zones and the different areas that you have is what initially stands out to me. Certainly all of the tonality and all of the waves and the lines that aren't quite straight, that they're slightly crooked and jagged and there's edges on them, I think are very interesting. But then again, out here, you have these really strong vertical lines and these really strong horizontal lines. So for me, this one was a 10.
All right, this image and the 11 that follow are critique only, so they may or may not be architectural. But I would ask that you continue to, critique these, give them a score just so the person who made the image has a rough guess as to, what their image is all about. And we'll
Perfect.
just get through these last 12 and then we'll be done.
Perfect. Well, I don't want the night to end. These images are fabulous. I think the first thing that kind of stood out for me is that the color is off. I would have liked to seen a better color balance. The foreground has a very there's it's almost like a big huge wall that's bouncing yellow off into the house. I also think, looking at this image, I think the other thing that stood out is I don't know if this adds anything to it. I think what makes this interesting image is the juxtaposition between the clouds that's almost dominating this house. And I think by cropping this, it makes it about these two, rather than when you don't have it. By having so much of this ends up becoming one unit instead of having two objects there, because they're so close together and you have so much foreground that I think it ends up becoming one unit. I think the job of this image is actually separating them by actually cropping there, so it becomes about these two and it becomes a stronger image. So I would give this a 7, but it has an opportunity to be better.
Chapel of the Valley.
It's interesting how we have this line right here that's kind of almost peeking over. I'm not sure, again, I'm not there and I've never seen this, but it's almost like we're peeking over the edge to see like this steeple kind of showing above, which I think is interesting. The starkness between the whites of that and the greens in the background. What you can't see on Zoom is kind of the softness that's happening down here that I really do appreciate. And I would give this one an 8.
Gothic Sunrise. Excuse me, Sunshine.
Gothic Sunshine. Let me. Interesting leading lines, right? You have the lines kind of going in here and everything's converging very much like railroad tracks, right? So that helps kind of give what we're looking at a sense of depth, kind of having that railroad effect that happens. Certainly having a symmetrical image, but then using kind of the differences between both sides to kind of make it asymmetrical, but symmetrical at the same time. So it makes an image more interesting. And I would give this one a 7.
We all fall down.
Great job in this image of really kind of pushing out this, the equipment. At first I'm like, is it too saturated? But in the end, I don't think it is. And it's interesting, kind of the color of this demolition to the color over here and kind of the juxtaposition between the two. I really appreciate the textures. I think you did a good job of giving me enough space down here, but not too much down there that it feels like you're um, you did it in a great spot, in my opinion. Same thing over here. It's still about here to this. Those are kind of the two things that I'm looking at, which I find interesting. The other effect, last thing I'll say about this, is there's kind of a triangle effect that's going on here, which helps your eyes be able to kind of roam around. There's actually a couple of them. So not only is there that one, but there's also, this is one unit and your eye goes between these three objects, which creates a circular motion, which keeps people eye in the image a little bit more. And I'll give this one an 8.
Lookout on the North Sea at Bergen.
I think the thing that stands out to me first is the softness of the background, kind of the overall, you kind of like this backlit softness. I think I think the reverse clarity on this is probably a little too much for me. I like the narrative that it's starting to tell, in my opinion. But maybe a little bit too much in the negative clarity area. I don't know if this lends itself down there. I might have just kind of darkened that completely so I don't see whatever that is, the collection, whatever it's saying. I don't think it adds to the story. So for me, I would have just made that completely dark. I care about the object of the building, and I'll give this one a 7.
Casa Mila, Anthony Gaudi.
Cool building. I love the textures of the building. I love the waviness. I think you did a good job getting a good exposure. It's a little bit more warmer on my screen than on Zoom, and I really appreciate that warmness. I wonder, just out of curiosity, what I would have done is if I would have made a selection of this and desaturated that so it actually separated. Because right now, for me, the overall color that is down here is almost identical to this. And I think you could have created a better, stronger foreground to background by not making this quite so warm down here, so it looked a little bit different. And I'll give this one an 8.
Neat and rustic.
I think the first thing that I find interesting about the image is that I like this floating effect that actually is going on down here. I wish that would have happened almost in the entire image, just because I like not being able to see where it is, what it is, and it becomes a little bit more abstract for me. And I like seeing some of these contrasty image. It's interesting to see the juxtaposition of how flat it is on this versus how contrasty is it here. So for me, there's kind of this like tension between the stones on the right side and the overall building. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened. And then you may have tried this if you would have made, maybe these rocks have a little bit more contrast to see what it would have looked like. And for me, this was 7.
Shadow play.
I'm looking for the image now. Found it. It's kind of fun having this as a kind of more of an abstract image. I think what for me is the most interesting thing here is kind of the highlight of just kind of this light, just kind of grazing the building, kind of blending and kind of wanting to build a story off of that, which I think is interesting. And then seeing the light and kind of the shadow effect that's going on here. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of kind of the toning that was done on this, but there's some interesting lighting that is going on in the image, and I would give this one a 7.
Production halted.
I don't know why I'm always a fan of kind of like this. Kind of reminds me of, and maybe you can help me with this, Carl. Let's see if you can know this other photographer. I think he lives down in Mexico, where he photographs shooting down through a tent. Do you know that one, Carl? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Afraid I don't.
Okay, Morale. That's who it is. So it says if you all get a chance, go look up this guy's name is Morale, and he shooting down on textures on the ground, and it basically through a pinhole in the tent. It's really interesting, and so I like kind of having those textures. And I don't mind seeing some of the kind of Instagram filter kind of feel to it. I think it kind of creates some nostalgia, which I think creates more of a story reminiscence, which I think is interesting. And so I'll give this an 8. No, I'm going to take it back, Carl. Let's give this a 9.
Cool. Little White Church.
So I think I really appreciate the streaks of the shadow going across the front of the building. I think it really makes it's a good time of day. You found a good place to shoot it from. So I really find that interesting. The clouds are great. A fun image to be able to look at. It would have been interesting for me. I think I would have played to make these lines here vertical. So they weren't kind of coming in and converging. So you can add some structure to this building to kind of make it a little bit more prominent, give it a little bit of, and then the last thing that I really like here, and I know this is a subtle thing, having the shadow down here, I think it really lends itself to really kind of giving a foundation for people to look up, and kind of giving me a sense of being there. So nicely done. I think with just a little little kind of tweaks on my end, I would have given this a 9, but with the vertical lines, I'm going to give it an 8.
Victor Valley Trail, Vindicator Mine.
I love being able to see, again, good shadows, good time of day, of being able to get the texture on that rust on the metals that you're looking at, which I think is kind of what's important about this building. Good color in the foreground, good time of day. interesting image. I think you did a good job of being able to make it about the building, and giving it some placement. Sometimes I think sometimes we try to give so much of the story about the building, about where it is, that we start to lose that the story is about the building itself. And so for me, this is a 9.
And our last image, and we have about a half dozen 9s and 10s to talk to. This is Walls Can Talk Crazy.
Good title. I love being able to see the craziness on the glass here. I think that's kind of what's interesting is all of the lines and all. It's not even about the building. It's almost like a painting in itself. Just to be able to kind of explore all of the different areas of the image. Again, I think it's good when photographers can make people look at an image for an extended period of time, just because of the day and age that we look at. So I think this was really well done. I think even where the contrast is, where the white is white, where the blues are down here. I think it keeps, and then even up here, I think is really important to kind of bring me all through the image so I don't get bored with it. So for me, this is a 10.
Wow, these people should have put these in a competition instead of critique only. That'll learn you. All right, we've got a few to go back to here. We're going back to, Portal of Wonder from Joy Lindholm.
Yeah, thank you. This was taken in the Calgary Central Library. This building is really hard to put into words to describe. The interior is something of a museum just in and of itself. The architecture, it's certainly one of the coolest buildings I've ever been in. And I was really taken by all the textures of the wood. This was designed by a Norwegian architecture firm, so I guess I have a thing for Canadian buildings designed by Scandinavian designers, so that must be my thing. But this was just such an amazing place. I spent hours taking hundreds and hundreds of photos, and really liked converting to black and white. It's a very kind of warm tones in there, lots of just movement, but I really like the contrast and each kind of individual wood slat. So thanks for the comments, Paul. Appreciate it.
That's a really cool image, Joy. In fact, thank you for mentioning that it was wood, because that was one of my questions. Was that metal or wood? Yeah. Very nice. Right Angle Curve is from John Salisbury.
Thank you very much for your kind words. This is at the Performing Arts Building downtown. I think I'm on the upper balcony that you take to go into the parking garage, looking back at the building early morning.
Gorgeous. Yeah, great shot. Good job.
That's a really cool image, John. If you can't bring the house to the mountain, bring the mountain to the house, is from Terry Hanford, who is usually the winner of longest title of the evening. And I have to confess, Paul, I cheated a little bit because Terry actually mentioned this is an homage to Wes Anderson and to small houses with their own style.
That's awesome.
The house is not far from Washington Park, and the sky was inspired by the Todd Lytle School of Photography.
I thought it might. Nice.
So kudos to Todd.
I'll take one of the points then.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to Terry, see if he'll do that. Nice image. Knock Knock is from Barbara Masonville.
Thank you again, Paul. Appreciate it. This is a community in Florida. It's on Highway 31A, and the houses in there are all similar but very different. They've all got that white Mediterranean feel, and their doors are fabulous, and it's just a really nice place if you ever get a chance to see it. So thank you again.
Cool. This looks like a big house. The problem that I've seen a number of times in Florida is they do these big houses, but they're like 10 feet apart from each other. There's like no space around them.
Yeah, no, this community, they're very large houses. And it's like nobody lives in them. You don't ever see any people other than tourists
That's sad.
taking photos of them.
There you go. Nice. Well, cool image, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Reflected Reflections. This is from Mark Rockkind. Mark said that this was, he shot this along with his other two submissions within a 2-hour period walking around downtown Denver. He was inspired by a recent club talk on architectural photography. That was from Frank Varney earlier this year. He said, unusually for architectural photography, I used a 135 equivalent prime. As this is all about the forms and the patterns, I converted it to black and white.
Really cool. Yeah.
Production halted, also from John Salisbury.
Yeah, this is a little town to the south west of Lyman. I think it's called Matson. But yeah, the town just pretty much has dried up. This was a lens baby shot. So that's where all the blur and everything distressing is coming down below. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Victor Valley Trail of Indicator Mine is from Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, this was taken, I think, a few years back. I walked the entire trail. What I really enjoy about taking pictures like this is I get a taste of history as well as construction, architecture, and the photography itself. So I learned a lot just from tonight's comments, and I do appreciate the comments, Paul. And yeah, I learned a lot about everything, all in one particular trip. And I look forward to going back to see him, and maybe in a couple more years, because the beauty of taking pictures in old abandoned mines and old ghost towns is they're not going to last forever. So it's nice to have the pictures while they're still there.
Was that your shot earlier from the other side? There was a
No, that was the Therese mine on the same trail.
Got it.
Our last one, Walls Can Talk Crazy, again from Mark Rockkind. He basically copied and pasted his comment from the last one. But he did add that the distortion here was caused by the glass, not introduced in post.
Yeah.
So that's all the natural wavy stuff from the glass itself. Very cool.
Hit the lights, guys. See your eyes.
Yep. All right, it's last call. That's it.
Paul, thank you for your great comments. Really, truly wonderful critiques and your time. You mentioned earlier you were tired. That was like 2 hours ago. So thanks for hanging with us.
Yes, it's only been an 18-hour day.
Nice. Well, hopefully those don't come around too often.
No.
Well, again, we really appreciate you, Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you for hanging in there to the end. And hopefully we'll get you back next year too.
Y'all are a great group, some fabulous images, so thank you.
Right. And do you want to say for the crowd, I know you typed it on Zoom, but did you want to say for the crowd what you said about Frank in the comments in Zoom?
So I don't know if y'all know this, but so Frank teaches for me at Red Rocks Community College. So I've known Frank for 22 years now. He was my department chair when I went to school in 2003, and he started teaching for me about 5 years ago. Great guy. He's fabulous. His architecture is stunning. So, yeah.
I'm going to send him an email tomorrow and tell him about tonight's conclusion.
I already texted him. I just texted him just now.
Great.
Very nice. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And y'all have a good evening.
Have a good evening, y'all.
Thank you.